I'm Seth Thomas Brady. I'm a social studies teacher, Naperville Central High School. I think, part of me, the biggest part of me is, someone who's connected to my family and my kids and my wife. The other major part of my identity, I'm sure, is teacher. What I realized when I transitioned from a more corporate style job to a teacher is that you never stop being a teacher the way you do when 5 o'clock hits at a more traditional job. I actually feel pretty contented as an educator, not in the sense that I have it all figured out, but I think when I have the opportunity to allow students to lead and engage in the issues and take action the way they want to take it, I become a learner. And so I'm constantly learning things that I didn't know before and seeing all sorts of examples of creativity. And that life of being a learner and engaging in community and engaging in creative action, who needs any more than that? I'm really happy as a teacher right now. One of the things that I think is important when we talk about inquiry and action is agency, and I think I'm really fortunate to be in a school where I'm supported by colleagues and by administrators to give me that agency. That said, there's a lot of work to do. So, a lot of the aspirations I have as a teacher are really about, standing in solidarity with my students about the issues and concerns that they want to address. I guess since I shifted to a more inquiry-based approach, I've learned just so much more about people, about issues than I ever had before. So as a curious person and someone who believes in civic action, having that opportunity to work with kids and learn from kids and truly learn from kids, there are things I would have never ventured to engage in. It's really amazing. In 2013, I participated in a program offered by the U.S. Department of State, a fellowship called Teachers for Global Classrooms. And what that fellowship is comprised of really is a year-long cohort sort of training and education on global competency, a field experience in one of 6 countries, and then your mandate really is to infuse global education across the curriculum. And so as that was finishing up and thinking about how can I myself begin to develop that and at what scale, I started to talk to other teachers. That led to conversations at our sister school, district folks, and the truth of the matter is in that process, initially the district said, we'd like the idea of a global education certificate, which is what we ended up deciding to do, but we really don't have the resources to do it. A couple weeks later, we won a $30,000 grant from a foundation to do this at the state level. And it was really the calling together of stakeholders interested in global education that led to a process, an assessment process or a performance task that was inquiry-based.
They're going to pressure the city managers to change it or...
Students have to identify a compelling question related to a global issue that's actionable. They need to conduct research. They need to connect with folks on the ground who give them feedback for the artifacts they eventually create to affect change.
My project is on the air pollution in Mexico City, and I got to that topic or that what my project's about, because 2 years ago, when 2020, when COVID was really recently, I went to go visit my grandma because she wasn't really in the right state. Once I landed to Mexico City, I noticed a change in the air, how it got more dense, and it was like more smoggy around the area. So when I was there, I was thinking about like how did it get that bad? Like I was just like, how could a city possibly get that bad with air pollution?
I picked the topic I picked, which was how to address the mental health of students of color in the U.S. because it's something that I've been struggling with for a long time. So I thought that diving into this topic would kind of put me at peace with like how my academic career has gone and how it will continue to go. And I felt like it would help those out there as well that are going through the same exact thing, because I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone. There's other kids in my capstone class, there's other kids in the school in Illinois that are going through the same exact thing. And so just letting them know that I was out there doing the research for them, I was the one standing up for them, was kind of a confidence booster for me, but then also like I knew that I was somehow giving back to the community.
Going from that creative process with educators all at the table, creating that process and implementing it was a really scary time. So one of the folks that was involved in that was a retired professor, Mary O'Brien from ISU, actually a former assistant superintendent at ISB for assessment. And I would call her all the time saying like, I don't know if this is gonna work, how's this gonna go? So take maybe 30, 45 seconds to decide who's gonna do the update. Be ready to just quick explain what you're working on. I'd be out with a student in the hall and I'd hear laughing and joking around in here, and the traditional teacher in me was like, I can't take this, I have to go back in there and like put everything in order again, because an ordered classroom is one that's respected by peers. An ordered classroom is where learning really takes place, and trusting Mary's advice to trust the process that this is going to work and keep supporting these students.
Because we'd be laughing, screaming, giggling in the classroom, and I know he was probably like shaking in his seat, like trying not to tell us to calm down.
I would say that districts have to make all families aware of that option and give them a forum.
I think being an inquiry-based, social justice-oriented teacher means really like standing in solidarity with your students, working with them to generate and ask the questions they want to ask, and supporting them in the process of learning what they want to learn, and I think most importantly, equipping them with the skills to take action. Action really is a set of skills that is important to teach. The motivation, the will to act is there, but how do you actually do it? When I think about aspirations as a teacher and my aspirations for students, it's really about equipping students to not only be actively engaged, but to truly be actors and learn the set of skills and dispositions that are required to affect change at those various scales in their communities, in their nation, around the globe.
So with Mr. Brady, I've taken Capstone with him, which was a wonderful class that gave me a chance to really explore a topic that I was passionate about. And it was really different for me than some of my other social studies classes that I had taken.
And this morning we had a meeting and I got it confirmed that we are going to be donating like half of our senior class gifts, about like $8,000 towards hopefully one of the peace and conflict groups, which is the solar panels group, so they can in the future use that money to get solar panels on Central.
As a classroom practice, what it looks like on a weekly basis is, in addition to the sorts of check-ins that you saw this morning, it's an ongoing and rotating series of individual meetings with students, seeing where they're at, where they're struggling, where they might need to go, really being a thought partner with that student. The part that's behind the scenes, though, is probably more important. Typically, as the way that I frame these inquiries as a student task is, in addition to the artifacts, which is the main output of the inquiry, sort of the public-facing piece, there's a whole nother behind the scenes piece, which is a play-by-play narrative that is metacognitive. So students have to explain the process, and oftentimes it's a personal process, whereby they arrive at the question they're asking. They then need to, they do sort of a, maybe what you call a funky or unorthodox annotated bibliography, where they're explaining, actually showing what is in that text. So when I read it, I know what they know, or they could go back to it a year from now and not have to read the article. That's sort of section one. Section two is reflecting on how that source moves them closer to either their big inquiry question, or oftentimes a supporting question that they want to know on the way to understanding the big question. So there's using features like track changes, comments. I tell them in this class, and I think you would find, if you ask students, they would agree, you will get more feedback in this class than any other class. Specific, measurable benchmarks and outcomes. So I'm really writing back and forth, asking questions, being their editor, insisting that they show things rather than just tell. And so that, even though like from a in-class perspective, it sort of looks like, okay, once a week you're circling up and talking, and you're sitting out in the hall talking to a kid, that's a critical part of the process as well. But there's a lot that goes in, a lot of learning and a lot of communication that happens on the behind the scenes academic output, as well as what ends up being produced.
He's trying to guide us, and he's like bouncing between the different groups, giving us ideas, helping us get contacts with the district or with school administration, or if it's like sending an email to our legislator, he's gonna like help us look over it and make sure it all looks fine.
And how do you come to trust your students? I really had to jump in and say, I'm doing this. And the result was that giving that trust, they were able to handle that. They took that trust and they didn't abuse it. They did more than I ever would have expected them to do.
And he trusts his students and respects them like the same that like you would respect your teacher. Mr. Brady was really there to answer our questions. Obviously give us some like outline of what to do, like, oh, you're today working on sources 2 and 3, or you should be contacting your expert by now. But he really wasn't very pushy with any of the classwork. So his main role there was just to kind of be a support system and not like push you too much.
To do this right and to really stand in solidarity with your students, it takes work. The difference though is when I've given feedback before I was an inquiry teacher, it's sort of like scan, 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 here's a comment, what's my grade, throw it away. And the way this is structured is it's mastery oriented. So each of those sources, they have to continue to address the comments until mastery. So they're taking account of the comments that I'm writing, and we're thinking through this together. And doing that is so much more, for me, motivating, because I know my energy is not just spent and goes out into the world as a grade. It is impacting that student, and they are making the adjustments based on my feedback.
Mr. Brady's class, he is more of like a mentor than a teacher, since like we work more alongside each other. I have my own topic, and he helps me like with my guiding questions. He'll help me come up with like where I should go with my research, and like he will come up with like where I should go with like the solution to my topic. But I think he's also learning from us. Like I know this year he had a lot of students take education-based topics. So I think if you look at him this year versus last year, I think you could say he himself has learned a lot.
So it's tremendously motivating to see that true dialogue of learning, with students. The unique thing about, taking an inquiry-based approach, and I think the surprising thing for me when it first began, is how much when you allow students to ask the questions, do the investigation, sometimes connect with people, sometimes take action, you become a real partner with those students. And it's that partnership and that's that really standing beside students that cultivates a whole different type of relationship. Having the capacity to teach in that way has created a much stronger, deeper, more significant relationship with students. And I think that extends into families as well.
I like to think of Mr. Brady as a guide. He doesn't really tell you what to do. You're not forced into making certain decisions. You pretty much have full control of your project and how you want it to go, but he's there to assist you, guide you. If you're struggling to maybe see something, kind of hint towards it, like help you figure out that path. He's ultimately a guide for students rather than like what we would think as like a normal teacher.
When parents and siblings see the sort of work that their kids are doing, a lot of it is things that they're doing in the community, and that naturally includes parents and actually gets them excited about the type of learning that they're doing.
I found through like my whole high school career, like a lot of the things we learn here, while a lot of it is useful and does apply to outside of school, a lot of it also really isn't, and I'm not really using it as much. So when I was able to take stuff I learned from capstone and peace and conflict and just like use it daily outside of school, it was just a really cool feeling to know like I learned it and now I'm just regularly using it.
I love that it gives me a chance to better understand myself. I like to call it a hodgepodge of different cultures, just because of my background, and I feel like social studies gives me a place to explore that and help me understand myself better and also understand my peers and my teachers and then just other people in the world better because I get to understand different cultures more.
Well, right now there's 4 bills in the General Assembly that came out of student capstone projects. A year ago, the nation's first media literacy required law came out of capstone class. One of the things that we did locally here, this is a school that used to have a Native American mascot that was a racist mascot. Students documented that. They engaged with local leaders. They connected with a Native American outreach director from the University of Wisconsin, organized a restorative community circle that it was student-led, included students, administrators, equity director, the man I mentioned before, Aaron Bird-Bear from the University of Wisconsin, as well as folks that were really attached to the old mascot. And so in the process of that circle, which went from 9 to 3, the decision was made, these are harmful, and a process of working with a local museum to decide which of these items should be preserved, so the past is not buried, and what should happen to the remainder of those items. So really community-based. We've talked some, another crew was interested in sustainability. They successfully convinced the school district and the school board to, in their new order of buses, to get a series of electric buses.
My group and we focused on trying to get renewable energy to Central. So we worked a lot with like local government officials and even school board members to just try and like educate them on the benefits of solar panels.
Hundreds of outcomes from, or at least 100 outcomes from capstone as well. I really think, and you've heard it from students too, really trust the process. Know that when you set students free in your classroom, they do amazing things.
I feel like you have to be fully invested in it in order for it to work. And that's a big thing, is being open with your students, because that communication creates the best way for students to research and take action and learn in a more supportive way when their teachers are open. And then for those who are on the fence about it, I would say it's one of the best ways for a kid to learn.
In the beginning, I think you kind of just have to put some trust in your students and see what they can do. Like, you're never going to know what your students' capabilities are until you kind of let go of them a little bit and let them have that opportunity.
It's scary, and I totally understand why teachers might feel uncomfortable diving into inquiry. They're doing something different from, other teachers, and the truth is that's pretty true. Ultimately, the teacher is also learning along with the students, and there are certain challenges that they may need to work through, and these are challenges that most teachers face. And so, one of the ways maybe is to learn from other teachers who do inquiry.
I would tell other social studies teachers to just trust the process, trust your students, and give them this creative freedom to finally research something they want, instead of being bored in class and all kind of being like robots and looking at the same thing. Because being able to research your own thing is kind of a privilege, I feel like, at school, especially in a social studies class where you're always following a curriculum. So just let them be themselves and trust that they will get their work done, because they are really passionate about it.
And I think, a pivotal piece of this is to really frame questions as actionable. If we want action as an output, it needs to be baked into the question from the beginning, right? If you ask a knowledge question, you're going to get knowledge, and then you got to think about how to act. If you ask an actionable question, action is the desired outcome the whole time, and it gives a whole different orientation towards the learning when you know you're going to do something about what you're learning. I guess my maxim now is when you set students free and support them, so high demand, high support, students do absolutely amazing things, amazing outcomes.
If I ask the children what do you